Have you ever wondered what happens when two people who absolutely despise each other are forced to share a room in a love hotel for one night? Spoiler alert, it's not what you think. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll see how one chaotic night can completely change everything. Now, let's talk about love hotels for a second. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, these aren't your typical hotels. They're spaces designed for privacy and intimacy, often associated with romance, or sometimes just mystery. Think dim lighting, themed rooms, heart-shaped bathtubs, and maybe even a few surprises along the way. But here's the twist. This isn't a romantic getaway. Far from it. This is a tale of rivalry, tension, and unexpected connections. Picture this: two people, total opposites, who can't stand being in the same room together. One is a driven go-getter, always chasing success no matter the cost. The other is their biggest rival, someone they've clashed with countless times before. These two have history, a messy, fiery history filled with arguments, competition, and maybe even some hidden feelings neither of them wants to admit. But now, through a series of bizarre events, they find themselves stuck in a love hotel for one unforgettable night. What starts as an awkward, tense situation quickly spirals into something neither of them could have predicted. Secrets will be revealed, walls will come down, and yes, sparks will fly, but not in the way you'd expect that I end this video. We're diving deep into this wild story to uncover how such polar opposites navigate spending a night together in the most unconventional setting imaginable. You'll learn about their past, the reasons behind their rivalry, and how one twist after another keeps pushing them closer to a turning point. By the end, you'll understand why this single night had such a profound impact on both of them, and why it's a lesson in human connection that anyone can relate to. So, if you're curious about how enemies become allies, or maybe something more, stick around. Trust me, you won't want to miss the shocking moments and heartfelt revelations that unfold. Welcome to our channel, where we bring you incredible stories like this one. Tales that inspire, entertain, and make you rethink what you thought you knew about people. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of storytellers and dreamers. Let's explore the extraordinary together. Let's rewind a little. To truly understand what brought these two into that love hotel, you need to know where it all began: their rivalry. It wasn't just your average dislike. This was the kind of animosity that made everyone around them take a step back whenever they were in the same room. Every meeting between them felt like sparks flying off flint stones, sharp, fiery, and impossible to ignore. But how did it get to this point? Their paths first crossed years ago, long before any love hotels entered the picture. They worked in the same competitive industry, or maybe attended the same school or belonged to overlapping social circles. Whatever the case, they quickly became aware of each other. At first, it seemed harmless enough. A glance here, a comment there. But soon, their shared ambition turned into an unspoken competition. Both wanted the same thing: success, recognition, validation, and neither was willing to let the other win. The rivalry really took off during one pivotal moment, a moment neither of them could forget. Maybe it was a big presentation at work, a scholarship opportunity, or even a sports championship. One of them came out on top, while the other walked away empty-handed. That loss didn't sit well with the loser, and from that day forward, every interaction between them carried the weight of that defeat. Take, for example, the time she presented her project in front of their colleagues or classmates. She had spent weeks preparing, pouring her heart and soul into every detail. Her confidence radiated as she spoke, and for a moment, it looked like victory was hers. Then he raised his hand, pointing out flaws so cuttingly precise that the entire room fell silent. The smug grin on his face said it all. He knew he'd won that round. And she vowed never to let him undermine her again. But it wasn't just professional jealousy fueling their feud. There was pride involved too. He couldn't stand her perfectionism, the way she always seemed to have everything under control. Meanwhile, she despised his carefree attitude, his ability to breeze through challenges without breaking a sweat. Each represented everything the other lacked and resented. Then came the rumors. Whispers spread about who said what behind whose back. Did she really badmouth him to their boss? Was he trying to sabotage her chances at promotion? Neither knew for sure, but the seeds of distrust grew deeper. Every conversation became loaded with subtext, every glance laced with suspicion. Their mutual friends started avoiding inviting them to the same events because, honestly, no one wanted to deal with the fallout. And yet, despite all the tension, there was something undeniably magnetic about their dynamic. People couldn't help but watch when they were together. It was like witnessing a storm brewing. Frustration simmered beneath the surface, but so did something else. Something neither of them dared to name. Fast forward to the present, and things only got worse. They weren't just rivals anymore. They were enemies. Or so it seemed. Little did they know, fate had something entirely different planned for them. A chain of events set in motion would bring them closer than ever before and force them to confront truths they'd buried deep inside that IT started innocently enough. An invitation to a party neither particularly wanted to attend. A wrong turn on the way home. And then, suddenly, they found themselves standing outside a neon-lit building, its sign glowing brightly against the night sky. A love hotel. Of all places. Neither spoke at first, too stunned by the absurdity of the situation. How had it come to this? Why now? And most importantly, what happens next? And then came the twist neither of them saw coming. So, how exactly did these two sworn enemies end up at a love hotel? Buckle up because the sequence of events is as chaotic and, frankly, ridiculous as you'd expect. It all started with a harmless decision that spiraled wildly out of control. IT was supposed to be just another evening. She had reluctantly agreed to attend a networking event. Something about expanding her professional circle, though secretly she dreaded it. He, on the other hand, showed up only because his friends practically dragged him there. Neither expected their paths to cross that night, let alone for things to escalate so dramatically. The first sign of trouble came when an impromptu game turned into a full-blown prank war. Someone suggested a scavenger hunt, and naturally, teams were formed. Guess who ended up on rival squads? Yep, them. The competition quickly grew heated, with each side determined to outdo the other. At one point, she accused him of cheating after he found a clue suspiciously fast. His response? A smug grin and a quip about how losers always cry foul play. Oh, the tension was palpable. Things took a turn for the worse when they decided to chase down what they thought was the final clue. In hindsight, splitting off from a group might not have been the best idea. But hey, pride makes people do irrational things. What followed was a series of unfortunate events straight out of a slapstick comedy, or maybe a disaster movie, depending on your perspective. First, they got lost. The directions were vague, and neither trusted the other enough to admit they didn't know where they were going. Then came the rain. Not just a drizzle, but a full-on downpour that left them drenched within minutes. Cue the frantic search for shelter, which led them to a narrow alleyway. And at the end of that alley, a glowing neon sign shaped like a heart. Welcome to the Love Hotel. At first glance, the place seemed more bizarre than romantic. Imagine walking into a lobby filled with plush velvet chairs, mood lighting that shifted colors every few seconds, and walls adorned with abstract art that looked like it belonged in a fever dream. The receptionist barely blinked as they stumbled in, dripping wet and clearly not a couple. "Room for two?" she asked in a monotone voice, sliding a keycard across the counter before either could protest. He hesitated, glancing at her. "We're not staying here." "Oh, really?" she shot back, crossing her arms. "And where exactly do you suggest we go?" "Back out into the storm." She had a point. Reluctantly, they accepted the room, climbing a spiral staircase that creaked ominously with every step. When they finally reached their destination, the door swung open to reveal, well, let's just say it wasn't subtle. Heart-shaped pillows scattered across the bed, mirrors covering the ceiling, and a tub big enough to fit 4 people, if you were into that sort of thing. The air smelled faintly of lavender mixed with something artificial, like cheap perfume. Quirky? Definitely. Luxurious? Not quite. Downright bizarre? Absolutely. For a moment, neither spoke. They stood frozen, taking in the absurdity of their situation. Outside, the rain pounded against the windows, sealing their fate. Inside, the atmosphere crackled with unspoken tension. "Well," he said finally, breaking the silence, "this is awkward." "No kidding," she muttered under her breath, dropping her bag onto the nearest chair. "Just don't get any ideas." "Oh, please," he replied, rolling his eyes. Like I'd waste my time. The moment they stepped inside that over-the-top love hotel room, the tension between them was palpable. You could practically feel it buzzing in the air like static electricity. Neither spoke at first, just stood there, sizing each other up, their body language screaming everything their words weren't saying. She glared at him from across the room, arms crossed tightly over her chest like a fortress. Her jaw was set, her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked like she was ready for battle. Meanwhile, he leaned casually against the wall, his smirk firmly in place, as if this whole absurd situation amused him. "Comfortable," he drawled, gesturing to the ridiculous decor around them. "Oh, hilarious," she shot back, rolling her eyes. "I'm sure this is exactly where you imagined ending your night." "Not quite," he replied with mock seriousness, "but I can work with it." That single comment ignited the firestorm neither of them needed. Suddenly, they were snapping at each other again, their voices rising with every word. She accused him of ruining her evening. He countered by blaming her stubbornness for getting them lost in the first place. Every sentence was laced with sarcasm and venom, their sharp dialogue cutting through the small room like knives. "You're impossible," she spat, throwing her hands up in frustration. "And you're unbearable," he retorted without missing a beat. "At least I don't act like I own the world." Funny, coming from someone who thinks they're better than everyone else. Their clashing personalities couldn't have been more obvious. She was fiery and impulsive, reacting to every jab with raw emotion. He, on the other hand, seemed calm and collected, or so he wanted her to think. His casual demeanor masked something deeper, though. Beneath the surface, there was a flicker of irritation, maybe even insecurity, because no matter how much he tried to downplay it, she got under his skin in ways no one else did. But here's the thing about arguments like these. They often reveal more than people intend. As their fight escalated, little cracks began to show. For instance, when she turned away from him mid-conversation, pretending not to care, her shoulders sagged ever so slightly. Was it exhaustion? Or is it something else entirely? And then there was him, pacing back and forth while running a hand through his hair, a nervous habit she hadn't noticed before. Did he always do that when he was stressed? It wasn't just anger fueling their exchange. There were layers beneath the insults, hints of unresolved feelings neither dared to confront. When she called him arrogant, her tone carried an edge of hurt rather than pure disdain. And when he accused her of being controlling, his voice wavered slightly, betraying a hint of admiration hidden behind the criticism. The room itself seemed to amplify their emotions. The dim lighting cast long shadows across the walls, making their movements feel exaggerated. The faint hum of music playing somewhere in the background added an almost surreal quality to the scene. Even the heart-shaped pillows mocked them silently, serving as a constant reminder of how out of place they were. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, their voices trailed off, leaving behind an uneasy silence. She sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, while he slumped into a chair, avoiding eye contact. Neither had won the argument. If anything, they both felt drained, their defenses crumbling under the weight of unspoken truths. And yet, despite the chaos, something shifted. The air between them softened, if only slightly. It was subtle, a pause in hostility, a flicker of curiosity about the person sitting mere feet away. Maybe it was the absurdity of their surroundings or the realization that they were stuck together for the night. Whatever it was, the tension transformed from outright animosity into something else, something harder to define, because deep down, they both knew this was far from over. The silence that followed their heated argument was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable, not entirely. It was as if the storm had passed, leaving behind a strange calm neither of them expected. She sat on the edge of the bed, her arms no longer crossed, while he leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since they'd entered the room, neither felt the need to fill the quiet with sharp words or biting remarks. It started with something small, a sigh. Not an exasperated one this time, but a weary, almost vulnerable sound that caught his attention. He glanced at her, noticing how her shoulders slumped slightly, the tension visibly draining from her body. "You okay?" he asked, surprising even himself with the gentleness in his voice. She hesitated before answering, her gaze fixed on the floor. "Do you ever feel like you're running out of time?" she said finally, her tone softer than before. The question hung in the air, unexpected and raw. He frowned, taken aback by the shift in conversation. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," she admitted, picking at a loose thread on the comforter. "Like everyone expects so much from you, and no matter what you do, it's never enough. I hate feeling like I'm failing." Her words were unguarded, stripped of the usual confidence she wore like armor. For a moment, he didn't say anything, letting her confession sink in. Then, quietly, he responded, "I get that. More than you think." That admission surprised her. She looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time in hours. There was something there she hadn't noticed before, something genuine. "You do?" she asked skeptically, though her curiosity was evident. "Yeah," he said, leaning forward now, resting his elbows on his knees. "People see me as this carefree guy who doesn't take anything seriously. But truth is, I'm terrified of screwing things up too, of not being good enough." The vulnerability in his voice made her pause. This wasn't the arrogant rival she'd spent years clashing with. This was someone else entirely. Someone who understood the weight of expectations just as much as she did. As the night wore on, the walls between them began to crumble. They talked about their families, how hers pushed her relentlessly to excel, while his barely paid attention unless he failed. They shared stories of moments when they'd felt invisible, overlooked, or misunderstood. Each revelation brought them closer, chipping away at the resentment that had defined their relationship for so long. At the T1 point, she laughed softly, shaking her head. "I can't believe we're doing this," she said, gesturing between them. "Talking like normal people instead of tearing each other apart. Crazy, right?" He replied with a small smile. "But maybe that's why we fight so much. Because deep down, we're more alike than we want to admit." There was a beat of silence as those words settled between them. A flicker of recognition passed over her face, followed by something else, something harder to name. Was it relief? Gratitude? Or maybe something closer to admiration? Their connection grew stronger with every passing minute, but it wasn't without its complexities. Subtle hints of unresolved tension lingered beneath the surface. When their hands accidentally brushed while reaching for the same snack on the table, both pulled back quickly, exchanging awkward glances. And when she caught him watching her during a particularly heartfelt moment, she looked away, her cheeks flushing slightly. Still, these fleeting moments only added depth to their bond. They weren't enemies anymore. That much was clear. But they weren't quite friends either. There was an electricity between them, a spark that neither could ignore, yet neither dared to acknowledge fully. "You know," she said after a long pause, breaking the quiet once again, "I used to think you were just lazy, like you didn't care about anything except having fun. And now," he prompted, raising an eyebrow. "Now," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Now, I think maybe you're just really good at pretending you don't care." He chuckled, though there was a hint of sadness in his expression. "Maybe we're both pretty good at pretending." They fell silent again, but this time it was different. Comfortable, almost peaceful. Outside, the rain had slowed to a gentle patter, the city lights reflecting off the wet streets below. Inside, the absurd Love Hotel room suddenly felt less ridiculous and more intimate. Neither of them realized how much they needed this night, not just to escape the chaos outside, but to confront the chaos within themselves. Through their shared struggles, fears, and dreams, they found something neither had anticipated: understanding, empathy, maybe even trust. And yet, despite the progress they'd made, there was still so much left unsaid. So many questions unanswered, because while they had broken down some walls, others remained standing, waiting for the right moment to fall. But for now, they simply existed in the quiet together, two rivals turned confidants, bound by secrets whispered under neon lights. The night had taken a turn neither of them could have predicted. For hours, they'd been talking, really talking, shedding layers of resentment and discovering connections they never imagined possible. The room, once filled with hostility, now felt almost peaceful. Almost, but peace, as it turns out, is fragile. Just as she was about to say something important, the sound of footsteps echoed from outside the door. Loud, insistent. Both froze, their eyes locking in an unspoken question. Who could that be? At first, they thought it might be hotel staff, maybe delivering fresh towels or checking on noise complaints. But then came the knock. Not a polite tap, but a firm, deliberate pounding that sent a chill through the room. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice steady despite the sudden spike of uneased and no answer. Just another knock. Louder this time. He stood up instinctively, moving closer to the door. "Stay back," he murmured, his tone low and cautious. She ignored him, stepping forward until they were side by side, both staring at the wooden barrier between them and whoever, or whatever, was on the other side. When the knocking stopped, the silence that followed was deafening. Then, without warning, the handle began to turn. Slowly, deliberately. Neither breathed as the door creaked open, revealing someone they didn't expect. Not a stranger, exactly, but someone from their past. Someone who knew far too much about both of them. Well, the figure said with a smirk, stepping inside and closing the door behind them. "Looks like I found you two," she gasped, taking a step back. "What are you doing here?" The intruder chuckled, clearly enjoying the shock on their faces. "Saving you, apparently." Confusion gave way to suspicion. Saving them? From what? And why now? Questions tumbled over each other in their minds. But before either could speak, the newcomer continued. "We didn't think I'd let you work this out on your own, did you?" They said cryptically, glancing between the two. "Not after everything." "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice rising slightly. "Work what out?" The visitor crossed their arms, leaning casually against the wall as if they owned the place. "Oh, come on. Don't play dumb. You've been dancing around each other for years. Everyone sees it except you two." His jaw tightened, while she blinked rapidly, trying to process what was happening. This wasn't just some random interruption. It was calculated. Personal. Whatever secrets they'd kept buried were suddenly under threat of being exposed. "Listen," the intruder said, softening their tone slightly. "I'm not here to make things worse. I'm here because you needed a push. Both of you." Her heart pounded in her chest. Push? What did that even mean? And how did this person know so much about their history? Every glance, every argument, every moment of tension. It was like they'd been watching the entire time that, as the conversation unfolded, pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. This wasn't just about their rivalry anymore. It was bigger than that. Their shared struggles, their insecurities, their undeniable connection. All of it had been building towards something neither of them had allowed themselves to acknowledge. But the twist didn't stop there. With every word the visitor spoke, cracks started forming in the carefully constructed walls they'd built around themselves. Old wounds reopened. Hidden truths surfaced. And somewhere in the chaos, they realized they weren't just fighting each other. They were fighting themselves. "You're scared," the visitor said, turning to her. "Scared of letting go. Scared of trusting him. But more than anything, you're scared of admitting how much he means to you." She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. Because deep down, she knew it was true. "And you," the visitor added, shifting their gaze to him. "You spent so long pretending you don't care that you forgot how to feel. But look at you now. Look at what's right in front of you." He clenched his fists, struggling to keep his emotions in check. "This isn't fair," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Life rarely is," the visitor replied with a shrug. "But sometimes fairness doesn't matter. Sometimes all that matters is truth." The weight of those words hung heavy in the air. Neither moved. Neither spoke. The room, once a sanctuary of understanding, now felt suffocating. Everything they'd worked through tonight, their shared vulnerabilities, their tentative trust, it all seemed to teeter on the edge of collapse. And then it happened. In one swift motion, the visitor pulled out a small envelope from their jacket pocket and tossed it onto the table. "Figure it out," they said simply, before turning to leave. "Wait." She called out, panic creeping into her voice. "What is this? What are we supposed to do?" The visitor paused at the doorway, glancing back with a knowing smile. "That's up to you." With that, they were gone, leaving behind a single envelope and a whirlwind of unanswered questions. She reached for the envelope hesitantly, her hands trembling as she opened it. Inside was a letter that would change everything. As she read the first line aloud, her voice faltered, and his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. In that instant, everything changed. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the Love Hotel room. It was almost unrecognizable now, less garish, less absurd, and somehow warmer. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a quiet stillness that mirrored the calm between them. They sat side by side on the edge of the bed, the envelope resting untouched on the table in front of them. Neither spoke, but the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was thoughtful, reflective. They'd spent hours unraveling secrets, confronting truths, and piecing together fragments of their shared history. Now, as exhaustion settled in, they found themselves simply existing together. Two people who had started the night as enemies and ended it, well, something else entirely. "I never thought I'd say this," she began softly, breaking the quiet. "But I think I understand you better now." He glanced at her, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah? Took you long enough." She rolled her eyes, though there was no real bite to it. "Don't get cocky. Understanding doesn't mean I like you." "Could have fooled me," he teased, earning a playful nudge from her elbow. For a moment, they both laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that felt foreign yet familiar all at once. But the levity didn't last long. Their laughter faded into another stretch of silence, this one tinged with something deeper. He looked down at his hands, fidgeting slightly, before speaking again. "You know, I always thought we hated each other because we were so different. But maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's because we're too similar." Her brow furrowed as she considered his words. "You might be right. We both push ourselves too hard. We both hate losing. And," she paused, hesitating before finishing, "we both care more than we let on." The admission hung in the air, fragile but undeniable. It was true they cared. About their goals, about their reputations, about each other. That realization alone was enough to shift something inside them, a subtle but profound change neither could ignore. For him, it was the way she listened, not just to his words, but to the things he didn't say. For her, it was the way he showed up, not perfectly, not without flaws, but consistently, through arguments and revelations, misunderstandings and moments of clarity. They'd managed to see past the facades they'd built around themselves. What remained was raw, imperfect, and undeniably human. "You know," she said after a while, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't think I've ever met anyone who challenges me the way you do. And I don't think I've ever met anyone who inspires me the way you do," he replied, surprising even himself with the honesty of his response. Their eyes met briefly, then darted away, as if neither was ready to fully acknowledge what lay beneath those words. There was admiration there, respect, and perhaps something more. Something neither dared to name aloud, but didn't need to be said. Not yet. Anyway, yes, they stood to leave the room, gathering their belongings and preparing to face the world outside. They couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. Hours ago, they'd been bitter rivals, unable to share a single sentence without sparks flying. Now, they walked out of the Love Hotel as allies, or maybe friends, maybe more. Before stepping outside, she turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "So what happens next?" He shrugged, a hint of mischief returning to his gaze. "Guess we'll figure it out as we go." She smirked, shaking her head. Typical. But as they stepped into the crisp morning air, the city waking up around them, there was an undeniable sense of possibility. The night had transformed them in ways neither could have predicted. Walls had crumbled, connections had deepened, and perspectives had shifted. Whatever came next, they knew one thing for certain. They wouldn't face it alone. And though the story ended here, with the promise of new beginnings rather than tidy resolutions, their journey was far from over. Because sometimes, endings are just starting points in disguise. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its golden light over the city, it was hard not to reflect on everything that had unfolded. What started as a chaotic, tension-filled night in a love hotel ended as something entirely unexpected, a journey of self-discovery, understanding, and connection. This story reminds us of an important truth. Sometimes, life throws us into situations we never asked for. Situations that feel awkward, uncomfortable, or downright impossible. But within those moments lies an opportunity to learn about ourselves, to see others in a new light, and to grow in ways we never imagined. For these two rivals, a single night forced them to confront their fears, insecurities, and preconceptions. It pushed them to break down walls they'd spent years building and discover common ground where none seemed to exist. Their experience teaches us that growth often comes from discomfort, that forgiveness, whether of others or ourselves, is a powerful tool, and that embracing change, no matter how daunting, can lead to beautiful, unforeseen outcomes. By the end of their night, they weren't just different people. They were better versions of themselves. But here's the question worth asking. What would you do if faced with a night like theirs? If you found yourself stuck in an unlikely situation with someone you thought you couldn't stand, would you let pride keep you apart? Or would you take the chance to truly understand them? And maybe even yourself. Stories like this one remind us of the power of human connection. They show us that beneath our differences, we're all searching for the same things: acceptance, purpose, and belonging. So, the next time life surprises you with an unexpected twist, lean into it. You might just find that the chaos leads to clarity and that the people you least expect can teach you the most. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what lessons you took away from this tale. Until next time, keep exploring the extraordinary moments life has to offer.